Hello, everyone. Tracy here, your resident business rebel, and you're listening to Digital Business Your Way podcast, the show that lets true stories and insider secrets of online entrepreneur life unfold. Our business world is growing, and as an online business coach and digital product creator, I believe you didn't become an entrepreneur to grin and bear your way through business. So I'll be your guide as we drop in on coaching calls, have intimate sit-downs with online personalities you love, and discuss ideas, opportunities, and strategies circulating our online world. So pop in your earbuds, tap follow, and join me as I demystify this thing called business. Hello, Tracy here. And if you listened to the last episode and found yourself noticing sales language, offers, and pressure, kind of everywhere as you looked around, just, that's normal, right? That subtle feeling of, oh, I can't unsee this now. That's that perspective shift. That's that veil lifting, right? So before we go any further, I want to ground us a bit because this episode, it's not about swinging to the other extreme or, you know me, it's never about burning everything down or suddenly policing every decision you've ever made in your business, right? There's no Eeyore moments here. This is not a you've been doing it wrong type feel. If anything, it's just context, all right? So last time I took you behind the scenes and showed you how I think about selling through the real examples, the real decisions, the real structures that I use. Well, today we're going to go into a bit more of the hidden depths, the undercurrent that informs everything. So it's away from business, it's away from specific offers and into the bigger picture. Yeah. Because once people start to see how selling actually works and why certain things feel off, even when you can't point your finger on it, that's often a moment of relief, but followed quickly by mild panic, right? Panic that sounds like, okay, so what am I allowed to do? And have I crossed some invisible line with my values? Do I need to change everything like right now? And, the answer is no, right? What you need, it's not more rules, it's just more context. And that's what we're going to go through today. So today I'm going to talk about the ability to influence, where this idea and concept actually comes from, and what it was meant to explain, and how it got twisted, into what we see now that often feels very heavy, very extricative and performative in this online space, right? It's not so you can memorize anything or apply it correctly, but just so you can discern. Because the goal here isn't the search for purity, it's awareness, right? Because awareness gives you choice, so you can make your business your way. So if the last episode helped you understand how, this one is about understanding why these ideas exist, at all, and how to use them without overriding yourself or the people you want to work with. No fixing, no shaming, no prescriptions, just clarity. So when we talk about influence today, it usually comes wrapped in tactics. What button to press, what phrase to use, what countdown to run, hell, even what numbers and colors to use in order to trigger certain reactions from people. But that's not where influence theory started. The work most people are indirectly referencing with all of those little tactics, it comes from a psychologist named Robert Cialdini and the book that's called Influence, Science and Practice, which has now had many iterations. But I think it's important to name him directly, not because you need another authority to follow, but because attribution matters, right? Context matters. A lot of things that people talk about are, their winning practices is just them taking these concepts and putting them into place. All right. So Cialdini actually wasn't trying to teach people how to sell, let alone how to sell more aggressively. He was studying how humans make decisions with a scientific lens. And that distinction matters because initially it was about understanding how we do things, not manipulating to do, right? So his research identified 6 principles overall that tend to show up when people decide to say yes to something. Many of these will definitely sound familiar, but we're not going to dig deep into all of them. But reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, authority, liking, and of course, scarcity. These weren't meant to be how-tos for marketing manipulation or for sales triggers. These were observations, ways of saying, here's what seems to be happening when humans choose. And when you understand this intent, a lot of things start to kind of click into place. Because somewhere along the way, the principles and the ideas that were identified, they got flattened, They moved from, this helps explain why we do what we do, to this is what you should do to make people comply, right? And that never feels good. I think at the heart of everything, we crave that freedom, that individual identity, even if we're buying from the exact same stores as everybody else. It's just part of humanity. And that's that undertow that we feel as business owners when the manipulation part, the compliance part, the should do's start to pop out, right? It's that shift from understanding to control. It's where so much of that discomfort around selling comes from. So influence was never meant to override individuals' discernment. It was meant to explain it. But in online business, when these principles get stripped to nuance and one person just repeats what the other person says, what the other person says, what the other person says without actually going back to the original material, they get turned into tactics that prioritize speed over understanding, that go into creation of actions instead of partnerships with them, right? And with that, scarcity became one of the loudest ones because it holds so many variations. Urgency being the loudest one, not because it's the most ethical, not because it's the most effective long term, okay? It's the easiest to operationalize. You can slap a timer on anything. You can change a price on a whim in our business versus in physical businesses. You can create deadlines, whether they're meaningful or not. You can manufacture scarcity even when nothing is actually scarce. A digital program has endless numbers. And for a while, it had the appearance of working. And I say appearance because it worked out of volume. Right? Going back to that's why people are so grateful for 1% to 2% conversions, and they can say, oh, but it worked. But what worked then, it doesn't work the same way now. And honestly, it without the volume to balance things out, it never worked to begin with. That's why a lot of people were disappointed, by how they did it versus others. And it was like, well, I guess I got to get more people on my list then. I guess I got to bring more people into my launch then. And it's like, Or we look at the underlying piece here. All right. People are more informed. Decision making has shifted with exposure. And a lot of people don't desire hundreds and thousands of people on their list in order to hopefully get 1% to 2%. They want to have like real relationships with their clients and my fellow coaches. I mean, you definitely don't want like so many that it completely dilutes the program, right? Your audience and yourself, you've been through lots of launches. You've bought so many programs. You've experienced alignment and regret with them. How many times now can you skim your inbox and be like, oh, this is going to be a bunch of promotional emails. Oh, no, this one I might, or you read one that you think is a real email and then you're disappointed whenever it was like, oh no, the subject line led me to think this, but actually it's just another promo email, right? So when something feels off, it's often not because selling has become inherently bad. It's because the audience has evolved faster than all these shitty old school tactics. And if you felt that tension, that internal resistance as a buyer, not just as a seller, it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong, all right? It means your awareness has grown, which is a beautiful thing. Because as awareness changes, the ethical weight of your choices change, which is why this conversation isn't about throwing influence out entirely. It's about returning to its original purpose, understanding how humans decide so we can support their clarity, so we can be in partnership with them, not bypassing them. Yeah? So if influence was meant to explain human behavior, not control it, then the real issue we're dealing with, well, it's not influence at all. It's defaulting. Okay? So going into default, it's what happens when something worked once or worked for someone else and you were told that this works, and then it gets repeated without reflection or evolution. It's when urgency becomes the automatic move, not because it's the best choice in the moment. And it's not even the only version within the scarcity, let alone the other five that we know that impact influence. But it's because it's familiar to work with urgency. And hey, I mean, tech supports that, right? There's so many tech triggers that are so much easier to pop in to make an urgency than it is anything else. And the thing about going into default, it's not malicious. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't even say it's lazy. It usually is what happens when you're under pressure to perform, right? Even self-induced, to hit numbers, to keep things moving, to do things a certain way because of a program you're in where everybody else seems to be doing so well and you're not, or, direct conversations with people, or pressure from family, or just pressure that, again, that we create in ourselves. Clarity takes time. Discernment takes presence. Going into default, well, that's fast, right? That's why it's the default. But speed comes at a cost in this case, because when urgency is used reflexively, like without any context, it starts to bypass the very thing influence was meant to support: their understanding and their trust. And that's when influence quietly turns into pressure. Pressure doesn't sound like yelling or manipulation. Most of the time it sounds like, if you don't act now, you'll miss your chance. Doors are closing, decide quickly. This won't be available again. One time at this price. And sometimes those statements are true, but unfortunately, often they're not. The difference isn't in the words that we're using to turn on and off urgency. It's in the intention and the truth behind them. Okay? Because pressure tries to collapse someone's decision-making window. Influence respects it. Pressure needs the yes to happen. Like it needs it to happen. Whereas influence can tolerate a no. And this is where a lot of people get stuck, because they don't want to pressure anyone, but they also don't want to stall their business, which feels like tension and unease. So they'll swing. Either they overuse urgency because that's what they were taught and it's worked before, or they overcorrect and decide they can't use anything that resembles it at all. Well, neither extreme is actually supportive or sustainable. And remember that anytime we find ourselves in like that all or nothing thinking where everything's either black or white, A or B kind of rationale, that's actually that trauma response. You're being reactive, right? So what we're looking for is responsiveness. Responsive to your capacity, your audience's sophistication, the context of the decision you're asking someone to make. This is why I don't think the question is, should I use it or not? The real question is, because sometimes urgency is, honestly, the best thing that you can use for an offer. If you have limited capacity, it's respectful to say so. If your energy or availability is changing, well, it is ethical to name that. If an offer is expanding and the price will naturally evolve, transparency matters, right? That's not manipulation, that's information. But when urgency is used to compensate for lack of real sales techniques, when it's doing the work that your messaging and your offer design should be doing, that's when it starts to feel heavy and just, I can't keep doing this anymore, right? Your body knows before your brain does. The tightness, the hesitation, that stomach feel, the just not being able to hit publish. That subtle resistance to going live and opening doors. Whenever you love talking about the offer, but the actual selling part is just like, oh, not again. They're not signs that you're bad at selling. They're signs something wants your attention within the process, within the structure of selling that's been created. It's not a framework. It's not a checklist. It's a skill, right? Discernment is the ability to pause and ask, what am I actually trying to support here? Am I trying to support decision or force compliance? Understanding or urgency for urgency's sake? When you ask that honestly, the right lever usually becomes obvious, allowing you to pick from options because there's so many, right? And there's so many, again, even within urgency, it's not all about taking away time or money or giving them time or money. There's so much there that you can be doing. One of the things I think we forget, especially in this online space, is that both buyers and sellers are on a journey. They're not linear ones, and they are not predictable ones. No matter how much people try to force it, they're not. That's why not everybody, says yes at the same time, because people are in loops, they're in cycles, right? They're in human journeys. We change, our capacity changes. Our thought processes and our wonderings, which discernment, it deepens. What we were concerned about or working on, that fluxes. What felt aligned, 3 years ago, 3 months ago, even 3 weeks ago, it might feel completely off now. That doesn't mean anyone did anything the wrong way. It means awareness has evolved. And this is why dignity has to be the through line. Dignity for the person selling and for the person deciding, right? Because influence, when it's used as its original intention, it protects both sides' dignity. It gives language to how humans decide so we can support that process, not rush it, not bypass it, not override it. Pressure erodes dignity because pressure requires an outcome. Whereas influence, it sits with that uncertainty. You're confident in what you've put out there and how they'll respond in whatever time frame they need to, right? So when you start to see selling this way, you stop asking, how do I get them to say yes? And you start asking, how do I make it easier for someone to know what's true for them? What's the next right step for them? Which is a very different posture. It's also why I don't believe awareness means you have to suddenly change everything for yourself. You don't have to rewrite every single offer. You don't have to swear off launches. You don't need to go audit every single sales page you've ever written in judgment. Integration doesn't happen through force. It happens through noticing. Noticing when something feels clean versus heavy. When you're choosing instead of defaulting, right? That's that 3 parts that I talk about. Observe, analyze, act. That's it. That's the work. And over time, those small movements of discernment, gosh, they compound. They change how you speak about your work, how you invite people in, the audiences that you're suddenly like, oh my gosh, this would be perfect for them. I never even realized. They change who stays and who recommends you. This is what I mean when I say selling can be human first in the age we're in now. Not softer, not passive, but more conscious, more realization, more grounded in reality instead of scripts. And if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, I can breathe again. Good, as that's exactly what this episode was meant to do. And since we're in an accidental series, because last time was part 1 and this one's part 2, then I'll say I'll keep going with it. And in the next episode, I want to take this one step further and talk about the actual undertow of those buyers' journeys and the sellers' journeys. Words that we often hear, but it's like, where's this concept actually coming from, and how does this affect what I'm doing here? Because I think I have these 5 parts in, so I'm good, right? No, it's how these journeys intersect, where tension shows up for you and for them, and how we can design businesses that respect both sides of the equation, which results in more profit. That conversation naturally builds from this one. So for now, let everything we talked about today settle in. Notice what you notice. Remember, clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from seeing more, right? And feel free to listen to the last one back to back. And as always, I want your feedback. I want to know any questions that you have. You can always ask at tracypatterson.com/AMA for Ask Me Anything and pop it in right there, and we can make a great episode about it. So until next time, be well and have some fun. Thank you for joining me here on Digital Business Your Way. Be sure to check out the show notes for all the links mentioned today. And while you're there, I'd love for you to rate and review the show. And if you have a topic or question you want me to answer, I want to hear it. Head to tracypatterson.com/AMA and ask me anything about business. If I don't know it, I'll bring it up with one of my guests. And until next week, be well and have some fun.